So thrifting is when one visits several different thrift stores, second-hand shops and vintage clothing stores in the hope of buying several items of cheap and unusual clothing as well as other items. If you've been following my channel for a while now, you will know how much I love thrifting from my Trip to the Thrift series and vintage clothing in general. I've lived in both the UK and the US and had the opportunity to experience thrifting in both countries. So for today's video, I thought it'd be a good idea to compare thrifting in the UK versus the US. Before we jump into the video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's quick and it's also free. And as you see from this photo, YouTube says that only 16% of people who actually watch my videos are subscribed. So the other 84%, what are you all doing? Be sure to hit that subscribe button and help support this channel. So with the UK being my home country, I'm going to start with charity shops. If you don't know what a charity shop is, it is a small store. It actually is really different to a thrift store apart from the clothes inside. So there's usually dotted all around in the city centre, whereas like a US thrift store's on the outskirts. Probably around like 6 to 10 different ones in the city centres. And they sell like a variety of stuff from like men's clothing, women's wear, kids. They sell like toys, antiques, CDs, records, pretty much anything second hand. And the good thing with charity shops is if you buy something from the store, all the money and proceeds goes to a charity. So you're kind of doing something good for the planet and for like other people too. And another good thing is everything is relatively cheap price. Usually clothing is everything is below £15, except if it's usually like a coat or a jacket. Like one time I found a Burberry trench for £30, but when you think about it, they are probably like £300 at retail, so still an absolute steal. But now for the downside of charity shops. First of all is their size. So they have a very, very small section, which is why it's good that they've got a lot of stores so you can go to each one, make a day of it. The only problem is it's sometimes hard to even find anything, especially for boys. Like for a girl, it's perfect. The women's wear section is always massive, and the boys section is usually only like 2 small rails. And the majority of men's clothing in charity shops is usually just like blazers, suit trousers, maybe like anorak coats, or just like non-branded t-shirts. So it's relatively hard. I mean, sometimes you can come across some absolute steals. As you've seen from my older videos, I managed to find in my hometown a pair of Air Max 97 rare ones for like £10. I sold them for like £80 to £90. Found some Rip and Dip, I found some Guess. So if you search hard enough and you go frequently, you are bound to definitely find something. A few other charity shops are located outside the city centre, but they're usually smaller. Sometimes it can be good, especially if you go to like wealthier areas, because they usually put designer clothes in there. They don't really care about it. You'll find a lot of like Ralph Lauren, polos, and the kind of quarter zips. So you can make some good money there. So now moving on to the US, we have thrift stores, and oh my God, the US thrift stores are just insane. Like you would have all seen the videos when I went for my year in Philadelphia. I kept going to Philly as well as New York, and I was thrifting all the time because the stuff is so cheap and they have so many clothes. So first of all, America is like stupidly sized bigger of a country than the UK, so there's more people, so that means there's more clothes. And usually thrift stores are kind of just like outside of the outskirts of town. It's better if you have a car. I mean, you may have seen other YouTubers like Paul Cantu, fresh from the Flea, they go thrifting all the time. And the thing that's mad in these thrift stores is it's like the people who own it don't know like the brands or anything. They keep the value of every product like exactly the same. You can get t-shirts for like $1. Like I found a Mason Margiela shirt for less than $1. I found like Burberry before, I found wrap tees. You literally find so much, but when you go there, you usually come out with quite a few bits. Every single time I'd go there, I'd probably come out with like 10 bits, and like everything would be below like $8. So stupidly cheap. And a few big brands that you may have known of is like Value Village, Goodwill, Salvation Army. But each states have different ones, but you see people in America, a lot of people do thrifting as a full-time job. Flea markets and car boot sales. Honestly, I'm so sad that this virus is probably going to cancel them completely. Like, I love the summer season of going to flea markets and car boot sales, because this is the place where you can find like some sicker items and some unbelievable steals. So this time we'll start with the US. So a flea market is basically just an outdoor market where people like pay to have their own stall. It's usually like just outside the city centre, their own kind of store, and there's stuff from like people selling art to clothing to antiques. Basically just people to kind of get rid of like their old crap. And then some people go there who are like dedicated sellers, and it gives people their own experience of kind of running their own shop. The reason why I really love them is, as you say, there's quite a few people there who are actually experienced like vintage sellers. Like they want to do it as like a kind of way to have their own shop. Usually as well, if you go near the end of the day, you get some unbelievable steals because people just want to get rid of their stuff. They don't want to pack it all up in their car, so you can get some really good steals. And you can get a variety of different things. And I think it's just like a nice good day out. It's usually in the sun. Obviously you may have heard of it, the one in America, the Rose Bowl flea market. I have never been to it, but I want to go so badly. Like, if you're into vintage clothing, then that is like meant to be like the top place to go. Like, all the best sellers, so you're guaranteed to find some heat. And I miss it. I went to the Melrose flea market. That was just so sick when I was in LA. But moving on to car boot sales. So if you don't know what car boot sale is, it's pretty much the same as a flea market, but people go with their car and they fill up their boots and they open the shop outside the back of their car. Here, I would definitely say you find less like specific sellers. Like, there's not people who just go there to sell vintage clothing. It's just people kind of getting rid of their old crap. I'm not too sure the prices of owning a shop at a flea market, but a car boot sale, it's like £20 for the day. So people are literally just getting rid of. It's like literally when you have junk lying around your house and you just want to get rid of it. People will be selling books for like 20p, CDs for like 10p. But there's always people who are selling old clothing. Like, the one I always come up best with is old football shirts. Like, there's usually like a granddad or a dad who's getting rid of his old collection, and some of these pieces are just worth so much. And some of these older people don't know the value of their clothing, they just want to get rid of it. And obviously the older vintage clothing, usually it can be worth more, so you can find some really good steals. I'd say overall, they're on the same comparison level. I say you find better steals at car boot sales. However, there's more variety and more guaranteed vintage clothing at flea markets. So this time again, we're going to start with the UK. So this is called weigh and pay, or kilo sales. I've shown these on my channel before. It's basically an event. One I mainly go to is called Pre-Love Kilo, but I know there's a variety of ones that go all around the country. It's usually they go like city, like every single month. And what it is you get a bag to start with and you pay for the weight of your clothing. So it works out around £15 for a kilogram. So with that, you can probably get around like 6 to 7 t-shirts. You can probably just get like 1 jacket or like 3 sweatshirts. So if you play your cards right, you can find so much stuff. And the reason it's really good is like they're just coming out of fresh bales, so the clothes can literally be anything. I found designer stuff before. I found like Stone Island, you found like rare Puma, rare Adidas, Tommy Hilfiger. It's got a variety of everything, and I kind of love that. That's probably the closest I'd say in the UK to actual thrifting. Like, it's a huge haul full of loads of rails and they just top it up all day long. I recommend getting there early to get the best bits at the start, but also staying throughout the day, because if you wait near someone who's just opening them bales, you're bound to find something good, and you can do it strategically with the weight. Always take the hanger out, because the hanger adds so much weight, people forget to do it, and then at the end you get all your clothes, and like, it's definitely guaranteed profit. Honestly, I'm telling you. So it's sometimes worth traveling from like each city to city, because obviously the UK, the travel time is no way near as long as state to state in America. So the bins, or also known as like outlets, are basically the last stage before this clothing is going to get thrown out to either be like disintegrated or to be recycled. So the stuff is literally at the cheapest part. The only problem is quite a lot of this clothing and other stuff that's in there is like damaged or marked. However, if you hunt hard enough, you can find some absolute gems, and like, I think you pay by the pound, or sometimes it's like even cheaper than the pound, so you can find stuff for such good margins. And you'll probably see them all over Instagram. You see people finding like incredible vintage Tommy jackets, some like 90s single stitch tees, some like bootleg Versace or bootleg Chanel, like some crazy pieces. I never got a chance to go to one of these bins, but I've always wanted to go to them, and people always recommend wear a mask because the stuff's so dusty, and definitely wear gloves because the stuff can be so dirty. But either way, if you find some stuff with marks, you can either like rework it or like redesign it or wash it, and I'm sure you can make some value out of it. And some people just like the battered look, like the washed out vintage t-shirts, like people love them. People love distressing on tees, so it just adds more character to a vintage piece. And I just wish I went to the bins, because I've heard from a lot of sellers who go to the bins that the bins is where you make the biggest profit margins. I mean, obviously it's a lot more hard graft and grind, but is so much more beneficial. I personally have to say that I think the weigh and pays are better than the bins. I've never been to the bins, so I guess I can't really judge. It's kind of a biased answer, but I've always found good stuff when I've gone to them weigh and pays. Like, I've always come up profitable from them. So moving on to a vintage store. So both countries have loads of vintage stores in each city, a load of independent ones, and a few chains which are kind of in a few cities or states all over the country. So we'll start with the UK. I'd say in majority of cities there's usually between like as low as 2 all the way up to like 12 vintage stores. It kind of depends on the city. Like, bigger cities obviously have more stores, and like places like London, Manchester, Leeds, places where vintage clothing is a lot probably like more worn, and maybe even Bristol, there's a lot more vintage clothing. However, the kind of clothes that are sold in UK stores are a lot different to the US ones. In the UK, I'd say it's mainly based around like vintage sportswear, so people love like vintage sweatshirts, track jackets like Adidas, Reebok, Fila, Puma, Nike. Very kind of rare to see like single stitch. It's more UK and like European vintage, whereas when you go to the US, there's a lot more like vintage like consignment stores, which you don't really see in the UK unless you're in London. So then with the US vintage stores, in every kind of state where I ever went to, there was a lot of vintage stores. Like in America, there's a lot more people, there's a lot more people to buy clothes, but the kind of clothes in each set of the store in the UK compared to the US is a lot different. In the US, you have a lot more like rap tees, you have a lot more band tees, rock tees. They kind of care more about like proper vintage, like single stitch tees, like more wear and tear in their t-shirts. Less kind of sportswear. You rarely see like sportswear Adidas, like you don't see like Fila, Puma, Reebok, anything like that. And then you see a lot more US vintage, so like Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, Polo, Ralph Lauren, all kind of that stuff. I'd say US vintage is obviously cheaper in the US, so you can buy like the Tommy Hilfiger pieces there, and then you can bring them back to the UK. And whereas in like the UK, they probably find some stuff like Adidas, vintage Adidas pieces cheaper, and they can bring them back to the US. With the vintage stores, I personally think I couldn't decide between the two. Both have the kind of good things. Like, so the US vintage stores are a lot better for like the actual stores. You'll find a lot more rare pieces, kind of like nicer pieces, but it'll come at a higher price point. Whereas the UK stores, they're kind of less like about like memorabilia and old pieces all around the shop, but you can find some absolute steals. So I'd have to say yeah, it's 50-50. So with events being the final category, I'm gonna have to start with the US because they have the best thrifting event, and that is called ThriftCon. If you know what ThriftCon is, it is a huge event where they rent out a huge hall, and the best like US vintage sellers all go down there. I think a few Canadian ones too. And then it's just a big place open, you buy tickets, and then all these sellers are just selling, so you can find like the best vintage from like all over the world, pieces that you would pretty much like never find or are really hard to come across. In the UK, we don't have something like that. The ThriftCon is basically like the thrifting version of SneakerCon. In the US too, they also do smaller events in some of the bigger states. So when I went to New York, I actually attended a thing called the Dead Stock Depot. It had like the best vintage sellers from around like the Philly, New Jersey, New York and Canada area. Some of the best vintage sellers, and I also met the boy Paul Cantu there. Some insane pieces, and I copped a few little bits. I'm glad that it has the variety between the two because ThriftCon has like the biggest sellers, so all the items, they kind of know their value, so you're going to be paying a little bit more, like a premium. Whereas like at the Dead Stock Depot, there were some small sellers who were selling stuff for like really cheap, like some stuff under $10, which is like insane. Whereas when it comes to the UK, we have events not as big as that. We have like Crep City, where some vintage sellers can go and sell us stuff, but they do like individual small events. Like an event I've sold up before, you may have heard of it, it's called Garm House. So Garm House is an event where people will pay for like their stall space. They do like vintage clothing, independent stores, and then they do like food, music, etc. So that's a nice day event, and they travel around the whole of the country. It's really good. It keeps the UK kind of like vintage community like growing more, and there's nothing like ThriftCon. They need to bring a ThriftCon to London because I would definitely go, and there's a lot more people in the UK definitely getting into vintage. So for the event side, I'm definitely gonna have to go with the US. I've always wanted to go to a ThriftCon. Unfortunately, when I was in America, I'd come home by the time ThriftCon was happening. So overall, I'm gonna have to go with the US is definitely better than the UK for thrifting. I still love the culture of the UK thrifting. However, you can kind of tell why the US is better. Like there's so many other YouTubers in the US doing thrifting content, like Fresh from the Flea. We have obviously Paul Cantu. There's pretty much so many. If you type in Trip to the Thrift, so many thrifters. But then when you come to the UK, there's literally nobody. I think there's literally me and Sickmate, and that's pretty much about it. So if you're really into the thrifting and you're from the UK, definitely go out to the US and go thrifting. You can pretty much probably pay off your holiday. You can literally just bring an empty suitcase, thrift loads, bring it back, and you can probably pay off your holiday. But I hope you all learned something about thrifting. Let me know your personal favourite and your opinions of UK thrifting and US thrifting in the comment section down below. If anyone knows anything about the vintage bins more, leave it in the comment section down below. I'd love to learn some more. For any American viewers, have you came to the UK and ever tried thrifting, and what was your personal opinion? And if you enjoy thrifting as a whole, I'll leave some of the links for some of my best trips to the thrift. I found some crazy stuff like Golf Le Fleurs, Comme des Garçons, Maison Margiela, Burberry, pretty much anything at some insane prices. And once again, if you've got this far, be sure to give it a like. Have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one.